In most modern armed conflicts, sexual violence in occupied territories has become one of the tools of warfare used by the aggressor's army. Mali, Rwanda, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Congo, Myanmar. There was even a rape camp there, and raping already seriously injured people. The woman was first raped and then killed. They will kill everyone they can reach. Sexual violence is a war crime aimed not only at the physical but also at the psychological destruction of civilians so that they would not resist. Unfortunately, Ukraine is not the first country where sexual violence is used as a weapon of war. Mali, Rwanda, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Congo, Myanmar, other countries of the world have experienced such inhumane crimes, but those who committed them were punished or are currently under investigation.
Були покарані або сьогодні знаходяться під слідством.
Acts of sexual violence were encouraged by the leaders of the Rwanda coup as means of waging war. Pauline Nyiramasuka, Minister of Family Welfare and Advancement of Women, openly called on radical junta to rape Tutsi women before killing them. It is believed that the estimated number of victims ranges from 100 to 250,000. They include not only women, but also children and men.
В Демократичній Республіці Конго під час Другої конголезької війни
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, during the Second Congo War, Dr. Denis Mukwege helped 50,000 women who became victims of sexual violence.
які стали жертвами сексуального насильства.
In 2018, Dr. Mukwege received the first prize in the history of the Nobel Committee in the field of combating sexual violence as a weapon of war.
I decided to create a center where women can get safe maternity and safe obstetrical care in Bukavu. But the first patient I treat, she didn't come from pregnancy or to give birth. She came because she was raped with extreme violence, so it was the first time for me to see these horrible things. What is happening here? I was not really expecting to do this kind of work. And each year it was just going up. Why is this? And at the end we understand that really rape was used as a weapon of war. And I started to ask myself, why is this and how we can fight against the root causes of rape and show the world what is going on. We think that if their voice can be heard, the world have to take responsibility about what is happening to women. Women can be destroyed in the ways that it's happening today. We can change hate by love.
There was also a military conflict in Guatemala in 1980s. Women from the Mayan Quechua people were enslaved for 6 years. It took more than a decade to get the rulings in the case against the soldiers who were keeping women sexual slavery. In other words, victims spent 10 years trying to get justice and punish those who raped them. In Bosnia during the war in the former Yugoslavia, the estimated number of victims was almost 50,000, but this number makes only 20% of the claims from all victims. For the first time in history, in 2002, the International Tribunal recognized rape as a war crime. This case is now known as the Foči case, after the name of the town in Bosnia where the crimes took place.
In every war we have mass rapes or rapes of women. This is always has been considered as collateral victims. They have been always taken as collateral victims. However, in Bosnia at that point, it was during the war, it was decided later in the court that it was systematic, because there were rape camps also.
Men were digging their own graves and were shot. Women were not killed with one shot. A more terrible punishment awaited them, the women's room. Those who got there never returned to the cold barracks. Young women and even young girls lived in a small black room. They lived from night to night, counting each step outside the door in the terrifying anticipation of the soldiers who would rape them again and again, and then throw them back into the room if they were lucky enough to survive another abuse. From the book As If I'm Not There by Slavena Drakulic. Whether you like it or not, suck it up, my beauty. That's how Putin spoke about Ukraine on the eve of the war. This statement is a veiled command to the Russian military about sexual violence in Ukraine and characterizes the behavior of Russian army, which uses rape and terror of the civilian population as a weapon.
З особливим цинізмом вони це ще робили, застосовуючи...
They did it with special cynicism, tying the legs and arms of already wounded and injured people and raping already seriously injured people. They treated women in a barbaric way. There were facts when corpses of people were raped. Then they burned these bodies and left the remains on the ground.
Залишали рештки фактично на землі.
Були деякі факти повідомлення після зґвалтування.
We have had appeals after rape, including murders or men trying to protect the woman who was raped or the woman herself. The witness reported that the woman was first raped and then killed.
Жінка була спочатку зґвалтована, а потім вбита. У них були всі списки. Вони все знали, хто де живе, знали...
They had the list of activist pro-Ukrainian citizens, especially women with active civil stands, became victims of sexual abuse. If Ukraine does not stop Russia, the same action awaits women and children in other European countries.
Таке саме дійство очікує жінок і дітей у інших європейських країнах.
Наші європейські лідери мають усвідомлювати і не недооцінювати загрози.
Our European leaders must be aware of the threats and not underestimate them. Russia is ready to act.
До них не треба готуватись. Всі елементи підготовки вже здійснені Російською Федерацією.
Они не остановятся, не придут.
They will not stop. They will come in 5 and 10 in 20 years. Everyone should understand this. They will kill all the time. And not only us. They will kill everyone they can reach.
Куда они дотянутся?
For the crimes of genocide and against humanity committed by Russia in Ukraine, not only specific rapists will be punished, but also the leadership of the armed forces and the whole state that initiates these crimes. In the modern world, the declaration of war is mostly a formality. For international humanitarian law to operate, an armed conflict should simply take place.
When there is an international armed conflict, or even a conflict not of an international character, but here we're talking about Russian invasion, Russian aggression, which constitutes clearly a conflict of an international character. Different kinds of sexual violence have been classified as war crime.
From the point of view of international humanitarian law, the international armed conflict between Ukraine and Russia began back in 2014 with the occupation and annexation of Crimea and continues to this day. Russia uses sexual violence in Ukraine as it did in all previous wars initiated by it.
Вони вчиняли сексуальне насильство і інші воєнні злочини в Грузії.
They committed sexual violence and other war crimes in Georgia, Moldova, Syria, Libya, Mali, and other countries of the world. They really believe they can do whatever they want. we need to create an international hybrid tribunal, break the circle of impunity and show the criminals that's enough. They crossed the red lines and they will not do that again in any country of the world.
І більше в жодній країні світу вони так робити не будуть.
The International Protocol on the Documentation and Investigation of Sexual Violence in Conflict defines the features of these crimes: continued violence and general insecurity. Sexual violence is often not committed in isolation, but rather takes place as a part of a broad campaign of crimes, for example mass killing, pillaging, public nature of acts. Wives are raped in front of their husbands, men are sexually abused in front of other detainees, children are assaulted in front of their parents and vice versa. Brutality of acts. Sexual violence in conflict can be particularly brutal, sadistic, xenophobic and misogynic. Often victims are gang-raped, with each successive rape more violent than the next. International Protocol on the Documentation and Investigation of Sexual Violence in Conflict, the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office, 2017. If you look at the decision of the European Court of Human Rights concerning the Second Chechen War, you can actually see the same war crimes that the Russian occupier is committing here and now. This is torture, this is murder, this is shooting, this is sexual violence. In 2011, a memorial plaque was installed on the building 38/16 on Komsomolsky Prospect in Moscow. Such words are carved on the black stone. On June 10, 2011, Colonel Yuri Budanov was treacherously killed here. He gave his life to the motherland, but honor to no one. In this way, the Russian Federation commemorated Colonel Yuri Budanov, who during the Second Russian-Chechen War kidnapped, raped and after torturing killed an 18-year-old Chechen girl, Elza Kognaeva. The court sentenced Budanov to 10 years in prison, but he was released after a year. During the trial, they tried as hard as possible to deny the very fact of rape. This is the natural behavior of the command. Soldiers will only copy such behavior. This and many other crimes were considered random and remained outside the attention of the international community. But these were purposeful, systematic actions of the regime. Hanna Politkowska, a Russian journalist and human rights activist who was killed by the Putin regime, warned about this back in 2008. Today, more than 1 million Russian servicemen have passed through Chechnya. They swallowed very bad pills. If I want to, I rake. If I want to, I kill. If I want to, I rape. Depending on what I want at the moment. What happened in Irpin, Bucha and other settlements occupied by Russian troops is a one-to-one repetition of the tragedy that Chechen people experienced 28 years ago. It seems to me that the occupier has only one goal: to intimidate and break the spirit of the people. There are laws of war, there are rules of war, and everything the Russians did contradicts all the provisions of the conventions, both The Hague and Geneva. They actually committed war crimes against the civilian population.
Проти цивільного, мирного населення.
Слушай, Кирилл, а вот ты звони, а телефоны вы где берете?
Как где берем? Это местные, все местные. Мы у нас ходим, мы ходим на зачистки, понимаешь? Видео, фото, технику отбираем.
Listen, Kirill, I called you, but you don't pick up the phone. We are going to clean up the territory. We take away photo and video equipment. Some soldiers loot. There are so many of them. A lot of chaos. A lot of chaos. We do that, right? We do that. Our generals, animals, our tankers, 3 men raped a 14-year-old girl and her mother. And what did they do to them? Nothing was done to them. In general, they should have been executed according to the wartime law. But our brigade commander acted humanely. He assigned them at the intersection that is always bombed, and that's it.
Поставил их на перекресток, который всегда бомбят. Вот. И все.
The situation we saw in Bucha, Borodyanka and Irpin, which is the occupied territories of southern Ukraine, are experiencing today, what we saw in Chernihiv, Kiev and Kharkiv regions, is a reason to say that this is a conscious policy, because sexual violence is not just the rape of one or several people. It is a crime, and it is an act of intimidation of the entire community and the entire population of the country.
Without such a court, you actually cannot establish the truth, because Serbs were saying one thing, Croats were saying the other thing, Bosnians were saying the third thing, Russians would say draw another picture of Bucha. They will say, no, these people killed themselves, or, these kind of things.
The key narrative spread by the Russian authorities is that there were no crimes in Bucha, and all the evidence that the photographers and videographers from all over the world so vividly demonstrate is just a production, a fake. Artists in Berlin made an artistic performance devoted to those killed in this tragedy, and Russian propagandists made a fake news based on this performance, saying that the women allegedly behave improperly, lewdly, as if they were drunk. These art actions are only a confirmation of the quality of Ukrainian women, who are once again lying about events in Bucha. In fact, the footage shown by the disinformation propagandists was filmed in Vilnius. This is a completely different action. It was connected with completely different events. That is one of many examples of taking video material out of context.
Вона була пов'язана з абсолютно іншими подіями. Тобто перед нами приклад виривання відеоматеріалу з контексту.
Sexual violence in conflict was long ignored as an international crime. It was seen as a normal consequence of war, as a war bounty even for soldiers, and was long ignored. For example, in the trials in Nuremberg, after the Second World War, the offenses of sexual violence were mentioned during the judgments, but nothing was actually in the judgment, no conviction for sexual violence, and the same afterwards. It's with the ad hoc tribunals, so the international criminal tribunals for the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda, that sexual violence became interpreted as constitutive of all the war crimes and all the crimes against humanity and genocide.
Trials on war crimes are needed not for the sake of the dead, but for the sake of the living. Those countries that have gone through the hell of genocide now have the experience of demonstrating the truth to the world. 1945-1950. The Nuremberg trial of war criminals set a precedent for a trial not of a country, but of a regime. 1955, the International Tribunal for Rwanda indicts 93 people, the first international tribunal to identify sexual violence as a weapon of war and as a means of genocide. 2015, Extraordinary African Chambers, the first trial in Africa when one state convicted the leader of another state, Yesen Habre, for crimes against humanity including sexual violence. 2017, International Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia leader for war crimes, crimes against humanity and acts of genocide committed during the wars in Yugoslavia in 1991-2001. 2021, the European Court of Human Rights in the case Georgia versus Russia recognized that the Russian Federation is responsible for actions during the 2008 aggression, violation of human rights to freedom and personal integrity, torture by Russian soldiers, and humiliating treatment of 160 detainees, Georgian civilians, as well as prisoners of war. The case Ukraine versus Russia will be the next. Responsibility will be borne not only by the perpetrators, but also by the initiators of crimes.